Okay, so everybody, good afternoon. If you're here, please say hi in the chat. Let us know you're here. I'd love to know who we got in today, who we got, where everybody's dialing in from. Give us a shout. I want to know. Hey, Brian. Hey, Marie. Hey, Mike. And I'm like, you're in the UK, and Brian, you're not. Ed, Roger, David. Hey, nice guys. Nice to see everybody. Hey, Bill. So today's session is really, really timely. I would love to take credit and say it was nothing but brilliant planning. However, Karl and I arranged to do this probably 6 weeks, 2 months ago. And it happened to coincide with something that we launched at Invisible in the last week. So the timeliness is perfect. And let me explain why. And then I'll give Karl a proper introduction in a second and we'll get started. At InvisiblePPC this week, we just launched a promo. If you haven't seen it, check your email. If you haven't got an email, hit us up on support on the live chat on our website, where we're giving away a promotion that we've never done before, and we've done it for a very deliberate reason. And I'll explain it why and why it's pertinent. What we've done for the first time ever is a promotion for our agency partners where, in conjunction with Google vouchers, if you win a new client, and by that it has to be a new AdWords account, then providing they spend more than $150 in their first 30 days of going live, Google will match it with $150 of their money. So a $1,000 budget will cost the client $850. So the client gets an immediate $150 win. But here's where it gets interesting and why it's relevant. Month 2 and month 3, InvisiblePPC are matching that with $150 off your monthly management fee that we charge to you for managing those client accounts, or a local currency equivalent, depending whereabouts you are. Now, why have we done that? We've done that because the first 100 days of any client relationship are critical. And sometimes month 2 can get sticky if all isn't going well. And us adjusting our fees gives you guys latitude if there's ever an issue when you want to play, or you want to just keep more profit in there so you can invest more time in that client. If that extra margin allows you to invest more, then that's where it's there for. Our aim is to see agency partners bringing on good quality clients who are committed for at least 90 days, who stay, because those guys, and Karl's going to talk a lot more about this, are the guys who become your long-term customers who stay around forever. So setting the tone right up front is critical. And there are 3 key events that matter. The first event that matters in terms of retention is the sales process. Retention starts during the sale. How you sell and what you sell is, in my opinion, 50% of whether or not you keep that client for the long term. The next 25% is the onboarding experience that you give them, because that's the first thing where they have put money in your pocket and you have to deliver an outcome for them. And the outcome is an awesome onboarding experience. So they're expecting money back at that time. They're expecting it to feel good. They're expecting to be well treated and well looked after. And only after those 2 things have happened do you get to actually do the bit called delivering results. And in my view, that's actually 25% of whether you last past the first month or the first 3 months. So today we're here to talk about happier clients, happier profits by upgrading your onboarding process. And when we were putting this together, Karl and I met earlier this year through a mutual friend. And Karl has an awesome business working with agencies to help them grow. Now, I'll be honest, Karl's typical customer might not be some of the guys on this call. Quite often Karl will deal with mid-size and bigger agencies, not smaller agencies, as I know some of the people on this call are today. But some of you have bigger agencies. So Karl has a perspective of not just a 1-man or a 2-man or a 10-man agency, but much bigger, and can give us a flavor that is different to what you may have heard previously. It's different to what InvisiblePPC would typically say. I'm fairly sure he's not going to contradict me in anything that we say in terms of Invisible PPC onboarding. But if he does, that's fine, because it's, you know, a different perspective that we're here to learn from. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. It may be better. And I'm here to take away my learnings from that, as I hope you are too. So think about this as you're getting ready to onboard clients. Karl and Karl Sakas and Company, you know, it's a brilliant business to be involved with on that. If nothing else, they produce some awesome content that you need to engage with. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. And I'll give you an example before we go any further. Karl was introduced to me by a mutual friend. And it was just a mutual introduction. We had a quick phone conversation, said hello, went through, you know, found we had some mutual common ground between us in terms of the people we work with, the kind of things that we do. And the next thing, in the post, without warning, in my office, was what I can only describe as a shock and awe package from Karl, which contained his books that he's published, which are cool, by the way. I've read two out of the three, some literature, and it was a great thing. Now, if you want to set an onboarding experience for somebody and the first thing they get, and I haven't paid him, is a shock and awe package in the post, you're on the good path. So think about the class that Karl has brought to this presentation today before he's even done anything, and I'm not a paying customer. So with that said, Karl, welcome to the call.
Rob, great to be here. Hello from Raleigh, North Carolina in the US.
So thank you. So Karl today is going to do a slide deck and a bit of a presentation for everybody. As always, if you've not been on a Invisible PPC webinar before, if you have questions, comments, fire them in the chat box. I want them. I will field them for Karl. I may not ask them immediately when you do, but I'm here to be kind of your voice, to be an extra pair of ears, an extra commentator on the content that Karl has to say. But Karl's the subject matter expert for today, and I want to give him that voice. So if you've got things you want to know, today's your chance. Get them in and fire those questions in, and we'll get going. So with that said, Karl, over to you.
Rob, thank you. Great to be here. If you're listening live or the recording, glad you're making the time to participate. Goal is to share some tips to help you improve your onboarding. As Rob mentioned, that is a key part of client retention, and it's a lot easier to grow your agency if your retention is strong and you land new clients and actually keep them. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. I've worked with over 300 agencies all over the world, every continent except Antarctica. So once the penguins get an agency, I'll be there to help. Typically focus on eliminating growing pains in agencies, whether that's related to clients, team, finding clients, or your strategy in general. And my goal is to customize everything to your values, goals, and resources, what I call your VGRs. So as Rob mentioned, if things here don't exactly match how you do it now, that's okay. You need to create a customized onboarding process. I'm going to share some key ideas and tips to make it easier, but you'll ultimately need to create a process that's unique to you. And I mean, that's a great way to help your agency stand out with your unique onboarding process for clients. As you can see, I'm not dressed like that right now, but in the photo, I have an unusual volunteer activity beyond my work coaching and consulting with agencies. I volunteer as a bartender on a 1930s railroad car. Do a couple trips, been doing that for over a decade. It definitely uses my client service skills, but in a very different way.
How are your cocktail making skills?
It's always a good sign when a passenger orders, another of what they had. But one of the nice things is that you can see, when someone is having a drink, you can see if they're actually enjoying it. If they finish it, figure that was probably good. If they don't, I'm always looking for ways to improve things. Sometimes people ask, "What's your favorite to make?" For sure, anything with a cocktail shaker is fun. But really, it's not what I want; it's what the customers want. Onboarding. Speaking of that, onboarding is ultimately about meeting your agency's needs, but also meeting your clients' needs as well. And of course, agencies do often have drinks involved at some point along the way. All right. To summarize, why does onboarding matter? Well, for sure, it impacts profitability in terms of boosting client retention. Additionally, if you've got clients that tend to be requesting things that are out of scope, if you can call out potential risk factors at the beginning of the relationship, you're not going to have to navigate all of those difficult situations later, or at least not as many, and you've set the ground rules. Typically, your sales cycle can be shorter because you can talk about the onboarding process. For instance, people will ask me, what documents are they going to need to send me if we work together on a project? I've got a whole document about that, laying out the things that I request, so it's not a surprise. So people can make a decision faster. Certainly it boosts client satisfaction, and odds are if you create a better client onboarding process, your team is going to be happier too, because there's less client drama, there's less firefighting, good stuff. Now, if you want to grow your agency, there are a few ways to do it. Long term, if you want to acquire another agency, certainly that's a way to grow. But day to day, if you want to grow, really it's about two things: new clients and upselling your existing clients. Now, you're not going to upsell your current clients if they're not happy. For sure, you need to get results, but they need to like working with you. And when you land new clients, you want to keep them. I've worked with some agencies where they're saying, how do I get clients to stay longer than 4 months? Versus others who are saying, yeah, people easily sign a 1-year contract and, clients keep renewing. One of the key differences there is how they frame things in the sales process. Certainly, the bigger your pipeline, the easier it is to be firm about that. But when you have a strong onboarding process, it's easier to lay the groundwork to keep people longer. If you have unhappy clients, they're not going to spend more, and you may lose those new ones. So, speaking of frameworks, there are 3 things to do to create a strategic client onboarding process. And the key word here is strategic. You may be doing onboarding now, and it may be kind of haphazard. And if that's what you're doing now, that is okay. But I would challenge you to upgrade your process. Use the info we're sharing today that you're hearing live or on the recording to take things up a level. You don't have to overhaul the entire thing, but there's some specific things you can do. I will share one key secret that you can do as you onboard new clients. I'll share that in a bit. That if you do just one thing from what I shared today, it's going to make a huge positive impact on your agency. But let's talk about some general points first, and got that teaser for that one thing tip in a bit. And of course, along the way, please do ask questions in chat. I know Rob is monitoring that, and I'd love to answer your questions along the way and toward the end as well. Alrighty, 3 things, and I'll dig into each of these in a moment. If you want to create a strategic client onboarding process, first you need to commit to creating a great client experience. I'll share some suggestions on that. Rob mentioned the book package that I sent him a couple books, my agency trends report, things like that. When a new client is coming in, they'll get that if they haven't received it before. Just got the confirmation from a new coaching client yesterday. And so earlier today, I sent a thank you note on my Sakas Company stationery from moo.com, Moo Lux Stationery. So, she'll get that so that by the time we get started, she's looking forward to it. But every little bit helps reinforce that I'm excited to work with her, and that she's going to have a good experience and good things are to come.
Yeah,
so more on client experience.
I might just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
And so one thing I'm really aware of is, and I think everybody else ought to be aware of, when people say yes to joining you, to taking you up on your service, that's a moment of high excitement. It's, yay, we've done this thing. It's going to change the world. It's a very emphatic moment. It lasts about 30 seconds before they go into, oh shit, what if it all goes wrong? Have I made the right decision? Are these guys good? Can I trust them? Are they going to screw me over? Is my business ruined? And whether we like it or not, that's because we're dealing with human beings and that's the way they behave.
Yes.
One of the secrets to onboarding, Karl's used exactly the right expression in terms of client experience. It's almost theatre. because you're trying to craft the experience that you could almost do with, if you can imagine like a blood monitor or something, or a blood pressure monitor, where every time you saw a hint of buyer's remorse and nervousness coming in, you give them another shot of theatre to make them feel good again. That would be a great thing to do, because that's what it's all about. It's about experience. There's more to it. You can't just present a good show. There has to be more to it, and Carl's going to come on to that. But think about it almost as a theatrical performance. Experience counts.
Definitely. I'll talk about a concept called warmth and competence in a minute. It's not just getting the job done, it's making clients feel special. And I saw, Chris, you asked in chat, am I focused exclusively on onboarding? No, that this is a slice of what I do in advising, covers a range of things. But I'm glad to dig into that later. But let's focus more on the advice.
Today we're talking predominantly onboarding.
What's that?
I said today we're talking predominantly onboarding. I'm sure it will spill over into growth and other areas, but I expect a conversation predominantly focusing on the onboarding experience and the business benefits of it.
Exactly. Next thing is to set and maintain boundaries. If you've ever been to therapy, there's the idea of setting and maintaining boundaries. And even if you haven't, I do recommend therapy, by the way. You need a sounding board and someone to listen and help you figure things out. But ultimately, setting those boundaries and then maintaining them, it's a lot easier to make that happen. Hey, Brian in Wake Forest, I see nearby. Thanks for joining. And then the third thing is logistics. So, at a high level, you want to create a great experience and you want to set and maintain those boundaries, but you also have to handle all the details. Things like making sure they have the contract, making sure the deposit is back or the first month's payment is back before you get started or before you even schedule the kickoff meeting. I've learned that the hard way. I'm glad to share more about learning that the hard way if you like a little bit later. So when it comes to client experience, the framework I like using comes from the book, The Human Brand. Check out the book. It's called The Human Brand. It's by Chris Malone and Susan Fisk. Chris Malone is a former Fortune 500 CMO, and Susan Fisk is a psychology professor at Princeton University. In The Human Brand, they talk about this idea that whenever people interact with a company or another person, they're thinking about warmth and competence. Now, competence is, are they effective? Are they getting the job done? Are there results? And warmth is, are you making people, or are you making your clients in this case, feel special? And the challenge is you want to ideally be high warmth and high competence. You've probably had some businesses where, where they were low on both. My experience going to the Department of Motor Vehicles is, low warmth and low competence. You're like waiting forever and people are not friendly. When I lived in New Jersey a number of years ago, when I moved to New Jersey, went to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get a new driver's license, turn in my old one and all. And out of curiosity, I asked the woman at the desk, what do you do with the old licenses? Because I'm thinking, like, they're getting hundreds or thousands of these a day from other states. Like, do you send them back? Do you destroy them? What? So I made the mistake of asking her what they did with them. This and that. She said, no, I put it under my pillow at night and I sleep on it. Now that I no longer live in New Jersey, I think what she was really saying was, welcome to New Jersey. But that was definitely a low warmth, low competence kind of situation. The nice thing is that if you struggle with competence, you do need to fix that. High warmth can help you keep people longer. Though with high warmth, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. On the other hand, if you're really great at getting results, in theory, you could slack off on warmth because people like the competence. But ideally, you focus on both. And you can see more on that in the book, The Human Brand. So on client experience, we've got warmth and competence. It's not just about doing the job, but it's making clients feel special. Another thing is that you want to think about helping clients. Oh, yeah.
Can I just interrupt for 2 seconds? I apologize. I'm trying to find an appropriate moment. I would just add to that in terms of warmth. One of the things with onboarding as well, onboarding, you want lots of things from your client. There is a technical element to an onboard process that says, I need you to give me things. Some of those things you may not be that organized to do. So I'm going to make you do some work and possibly put you through some pain. Anyone who's filled in one of our onboarding forms, it's really long. There's a lot in it. We don't ask questions for vanity or just because we're curious. We ask things we need to know the answers to do the best job for our client. So embellishing that mechanical process and logistics, and I know you're going to, with the warmth alongside it, it feels better. I love the expression warmth and competence because it's really tangible thing to get hold of, but it's a really hard thing to do right until you get really good at it.
Definitely. And you can also apply it in managing your team, whether you have employees, freelancers, or both. It's not just about, what have you done for me lately with your team, but, how are they doing? If they were sick, well, here's an example. One of my team members was sick, and I sent her flowers. I have an account on the, florist website kind of thing. And, it's a small thing, but that $40 or $50 or $60 shows you care. I do that with clients as well, if they run into challenges. So paying attention, things like sending clients birthday cards, sending a sympathy card if something bad happens to them. It's simple yet powerful, and so many people don't do it. So when you do it, it stands out. I think it's unfortunate in many ways that stands out because so many people don't do it, but it works well for your agency if you take the time to do it. And you can even, buy a bunch of cards ahead of time. So when something happens, you're good to go.
It's amazing how low the bar is here, guys.
Yeah. I mean, thinking, flying, for instance, if the plane arrives on time and, you were offered your free soft drink, or maybe not free, depending on the airline, that's seen as a plus, not, but I mean, think about your agency. Do you typically get people that have worked with an agency before, or are you typically working with people who've never worked with an agency in the past? The ideal client is someone who's worked with an agency previously, so that you're not the very first one. If they're switching, something went wrong the previous time, and so they're choosing to move over to you, or they're considering you if it's in the sales process. But the thing is that they've been burned. I mean, this is like the relationship example would be, they got out of a bad relationship, and now they're going to be, a little cautious now. The more you can do to create and reinforce that great client experience, the happier they're going to be, the less likely they are to feel buyer's remorse, and the more likely they are to stick with you. So I'm curious, Rob, what are some things you do to help your clients feel, or partners in particular, feel special?
If I'm honest, I would suggest we do a pretty poor job of it. Most of our work is remote, and I'm sure that's the same for many people in here. So one things we do is we try and make sure every new client has an onboard call. There's a form that kicks off the process, but it's always a call that follows afterwards. And we try and, obviously the people who handle those calls are nice people. So we try and keep that element as human as possible. Thereafter, a lot of it tends to be, email stuff. So I think we, as anybody else, have got lessons to learn here because we could do a better job.
And I mentioned the moo.com Lux note cards. So they're branded to Sakas Company, and you obviously you can design them however you like. They actually have a sandwich of color in between. And my particular company color is orange, and they happen to have an orange sandwich. I think there are 8 different options. Those cards are $2 to $3 a piece, US. But imagine if someone is investing thousands of dollars with you and your agency, and think about the lifetime value of the relationship. Totally worth it.
Yep.
So, Mike, I saw you mentioned, can you give more examples providing warmth to clients? Well, let's see, a few things. I happen to be heading to Denver later this fall. I'm keynoting at an event called Agency Con in Breckenridge, Colorado, speaking about agency sales process. It's called Speed Dating Your Sales Prospects, How to Close Agency Deals Faster. And while I'm out there, I have some clients in the Denver area, and I'll be visiting them. One of my clients is coming up on his 3-year anniversary in working with me. Enjoy working with him. And as a thank you, I'm going to do a free half-day on-site at his office with his team. Now, normally this would be quite expensive if I were coming just for the trip, just to see him. But since I'm there already, the incremental cost of adding that on-site is relatively low. And I've called it out as I call it strategically free. Here I've framed it to him as you're getting a free, free on-site, because you're a valued client, and because I happen to be there already. It's not that I'm flying out to Denver just to meet with him, but because I'm able to do that add-on, I'm able to frame it as a client appreciation thing, when ultimately it's easy enough to fit into my schedule. So looking for things, ways to make it special. Had another client mention that he was in the midst of moving into a new house, and was really stressed out about it. At one point, apparently, someone made a mistake, and the basement got filled with sewage. Kind of an unfortunate situation. Well, you know what? He got a $50 Home Depot, home improvement store gift card. They're small things, right? That's $50 on a client who's investing thousands and thousands of dollars over the year. But, it doesn't always have to be cash. I mean, it could just be a note.
Can I just make a point, Karl, on that? I think to add to your comment, I think, Mike, it's really about listening to what the client says while pre-sales, during sales, and just getting started with you. Listen to not just the business things they tell you, what's going on in their life, what the issues they're facing, the things that they've got going on. Listen, pay attention, and if necessary, make it a formal task to actually check off, is there any way I can think of, based on my last conversation with this guy, how I can make him feel special? And by guy, I mean whoever it is you're speaking to.
Exactly. It's about paying attention and then remembering it later. A client mentioned that he was doing a personal retreat for his birthday. Well, I made sure to send a birthday card earlier, a few weeks before. I didn't know the exact date, but I knew the weekend that was, roughly his birthday. So a few weeks beforehand, sent the card. Another case, I'll actually go to the store and I'll stock up on sympathy cards. I actually have a couple sympathy cards for a pet who has passed away. They make them. Things like that. Also, if a client is on vacation, I will put their vacation dates into my calendar. And although I've worked with over 300 agencies, I limit my active client count. My goal is to provide a boutique approach. So generally, I'm working with about 15 active clients at any one time. So I put their vacation days in. And the day before they go on vacation, I wish them a good vacation. And the day they get back, I text them and ask how it went. Now, you may not want to be texting with your clients. As an executive coach and agency consultant, I have a very close relationship with my clients. You may not want to give your clients your mobile number for them to text you, although I would encourage it. I talk that in fact it is what we're talking about the safety valve. And Rob, can you still see the slides?
You can still see the slides. You carry on. You're good to go.
So managing up is about helping your client look good to their boss. So maybe that's, for instance, you're in a meeting with your client and their boss, and you can say something to their boss that complements what your contact did. Give them credit if they thought of something that you're working on. Your job is to make them look good. But there's that safety valve thing. And the safety valve thing is, if you are in a leadership role, you're the owner, and you're not the day-to-day contact, it's important that each client has your contact info. So if something goes wrong, the client can contact you as the safety valve to say, I'm really frustrated by so-and-so. I can't believe they keep screwing this up. They keep canceling meetings. They keep failing to meet deadlines on sending me updates, things like that, whatever it might be. You want to hear from the client first rather than hearing that the client is canceling. There's a car dealer, probably a couple car dealers, where they'll say that if you buy a car from us, you will get the general manager's personal cell phone number. How often do people actually call? Probably not very often. But you know what? If something goes poorly, I am sure the GM is glad to get that phone call. And just by saying you do it, doesn't mean you're going to be flooded with phone calls. But people want that reassurance, and that helps on buyer's remorse. Great suggestion on chat from Brian. You mentioned sending branded gifts. There's some ways to automate that. Brian, as you mentioned, they'll call you and thank you personally. People reach out. I think
people do have a sense of indebtedness to a nice guy who gives them things that are unexpected. The whole Cialdini approach to reciprocity. And
nice.
the fact that reciprocity is not created by giving high-value things. It's created by giving things that are not expected. And it can be as small as you like, from a text to an email to a call to a thank you note to a gift, and all have value to that client. Anyway, let's move on, Karl.
Sure. Sounds good. And really it's part of being nice in general. When you're hiring people, ask about what's something nice you did for a client you didn't have to do. If they can't think of anything, they're probably not going to start doing nice things now. All right. So when you're working with clients, it's important to consider what the client is hiring you to do. And I have an agency services model that I've developed, Think, Teach, Do, that helps illustrate this. And you want to know what it is the client is actually hiring you for. Because if you're not delivering that, if you're delivering something else because you don't realize what they actually want, they're going to be frustrated. That'll create a bad client experience. Think is strategy. Teach is training and empowerment. And Do is about implementation. So for Think, a client is saying, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. Think is typically a high value, high margin opportunity. Teach is where the client is saying, teach me how to do it myself. I want to do it in-house. And Do is implementation, where the client is saying, do it for me. And of course, there are various cross-sell opportunities here. But the more you understand about what they actually want from you, the more you can deliver it, and then ideally go above and beyond, although at a minimum, meet their expectations. Speaking of expectations, we're moving on to setting and maintaining boundaries. So first, manage their expectations. If we're working with a client who's never worked with an agency before, they don't know what to expect. They don't know what meetings and reporting are like. They don't know what they need to provide you. They may not know about the time commitment they need to provide on their side to get stuff done every week or every month, depending on how you structure things. And even if they have worked with an agency before, you probably do things differently. For instance, is it a monthly call? Is it a weekly call? Is there no call in the first place? I don't recommend that. But what should they expect? What should they expect in terms of turnaround time? For instance, if they reach out, is it you're going to reply the same day? You're going to reply by the end of the next day? Is it 2 business days? Is there an escalated or emergency response kind of situation? Think of building a service level agreement for your clients, but how fast you'll get back to them. So that way they're not wondering, why haven't they heard back? You can also use policies. As the director of client services at a digital agency, I found that certain questions kept coming up. And then I would be pushing back on it but I felt like it would be easier if I had something that I could use to help me make the point. And I actually created a client bill of rights. Now, spoiler, it was really more of an agency bill of rights. But it was laying out what's billable, what's not, what were the rates for different activities, what was the turnaround time on things, how did it all work, what was the best way to get in touch. The answer, use the project management system, don't just like email us all the time, kind of thing. And so ultimately I could share that with clients when they got started, and then if there were problems along the way, I could always use that to say, hey, I'd love to do that, but unfortunately the policy is XYZ. The nice thing about policies is that you can always choose to relax them. But when you have them, you can also use that to reinforce them, setting and maintaining that boundary.
And I'd add to that as well, Karl.
Yep.
Most agencies don't have policies. And most agencies don't necessarily manage expectations particularly well. My view is always, the person you're dealing with is your client, not your mother. You're not obliged to take calls 24/7. You may feel that way sometimes, and so set good expectations and, as you say, boundaries. And the policies point, it's actually a selling point. You can use, think about a policy as a pre-sales tool as well. Here's how we operate. Here's what you can expect when you work with us. No secrets, no gotchas, no surprises. We're telling you up front how we operate so we can make sure we're a good fit.
Exactly. Great question from Chris on chat, asking, do you work with different niches on their onboarding, any in particular more than others, and the effect of a niche focus? Well, I am a huge fan of industry specialization, vertical specialization, which, I only work with agencies, so, I'm practicing it myself. The nice thing if your agency specializes in a vertical is that you can use language that makes clients feel welcome, makes them feel understood. For instance, say you work with medical practices. Instead of using words like customers or clients, you would use patients, the new patient intake process, the patient onboarding process, getting patients in for appointments, things like that. So it's a lot easier. The language is easier, but also you can use examples from their own industry, as you're talking with people. For instance, I had a client where some of their team members freaked out about a change related to outsourcing some things to freelancers. And so I was able to talk through some examples there, help him figure out what to do, and sort it out so that ultimately his team could settle down there. It's easier if you have people in just one industry. It can be scary. That's a whole separate conversation about industry vertical specialization. I am a fan. It makes it a lot easier for onboarding because you know what to expect. For instance, if you work with law firms and your contact is one of the partners, every minute they spend with you on marketing, even if they want to spend time on marketing, is a minute they are not billing to their clients. So you better figure out a way to make things go as smoothly and quickly as possible. The other piece, or Rob, anything you'd add to that?
Well, I think the only thing I would add to that, because I think this is great, is, and I forgot what I was going to say now. Sorry, I had a complete brain blank for a second. It's around the niching things, and particularly about if it's a first-time experience with an agency.
Yes.
If it's the first time, think about the past experience that your client has had, and your onboarding process and your experience should take that into account. One thing we've done recently in Invisible, and I'll explain why this is important, is we recognise that some agencies sell PPC as a sideline. It's not their focus. There might be a web agency. Occasionally, a PPC client comes in and they'll take them on. But they don't do it very often. So we now created a process where whenever we see a new client onboard form or even an attempt to fill one out for an agency that hasn't onboarded for us for 6 months, we step in, and coming back to human, Aaron, who works on our pre-sales team, will jump in and will human manage that first onboard through and say, here's what's changed. Here's what you need to know. Let me help you through it, and hand that person into the onboarding team. Now, that's a really important thing for that person who hasn't done it for a while, because they're effectively almost a new customer again for the first time. But if you're a seasoned person who onboards with us every couple of weeks, having a human step in when you just want to fill the form in as efficiently as possible, get it done and out the door, that's going to get pretty annoying pretty quickly. So we change the process based on the person's experience in dealing with us previously. And it's the same here, that if they've had an agency before and it was a bad experience, understand what they didn't like and adjust accordingly. Within the constraints of your framework, adjust to manage that negative experience past. Don't repeat it, for goodness sake. But if they're brand new, set the agenda, set the experience, future pace it so they know what to expect, and they'll have a great outcome.
The part about remembering what they've said before, what's happened before, is really important. Keep in mind that for your clients, if someone of your clients says something to anyone at your agency, as far as the client is concerned, they have told the agency. So make sure your team knows. I mean, this goes beyond onboarding. Make sure they know if they hear a key thing, share that with everyone else. For instance, that they're going to be, traveling a certain week. You don't want to be expecting them to get certain deliverables turned around that week if you know that they're going to be away. One more thing on boundaries, which is around managing scope, and my 7 magic words to kill scope creep. If you've ever had scope creep, it is not fun. The 7 magic words are: would you like an estimate for that? That is, someone asks for something that's out of scope, and you say, hey, that's a great idea that fits into the strategy, blah, blah, blah. Would you like an estimate for that? My experience from being an agency PM, director of client services, director of operations, before becoming a consultant, about half the time people will say, oh, that's extra. Never mind. It's not that important. Maybe 40% of the time they'll say, sure, let me know what the estimate is and I'll decide if I want to move forward. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to proceed, but they are recognizing that it is billable. And then maybe 10% of the time, and this is going to vary depending on your client base, 10% they're like, wait, estimate, extra, like I thought this was included, things like that. That's not a fun conversation in that roughly 10% of the situations, but now you can address that and address the what's in or out of scope, rather than running off to do the work or running off to do an estimate. You can have that conversation and then decide what to do from there. It's about being strategic, not reactive. All right, and then logistics. And I have that secret for you, that if you do just one thing, coming up in a moment. So clients like structure. Clients are like toddlers in the sense that they like structure. They like that, you're not just figuring this out for the first time. If you're listening and you have a toddler, you've probably seen that yourself, around the boundaries and giving them structure. That includes things like having checklists and templates for your onboarding process. For instance, say you need to get someone's credit card info for auto billing. I just sent a new credit card authorization to the coaching client who's starting right now. I pre-filled it with her info. Obviously, I don't know her credit card info, but pre-filled agency name, the start date, the amount, things like that. There's no reason for her to have to fill out things that I knew. Don't do that. This also would include in your project management system. There are probably certain onboarding tasks or certain types of project or retainer startup tasks. You could probably build some templates to say, okay, pull in the blah, blah, blah checklist rather than having to reinvent it. If you use Gmail or G Suite for email, you can use canned responses to put things in there. You can also use Boomerang, or if you're on a Mac, you can use Mail Butler if you're using Apple Mail. Some other options too, to get reminders about emails, to get things to come back to you, things like that. That also ties into the logistics, ties into the boundaries piece. My strong recommendation: do not even schedule the kickoff meeting until you've received a signed contract and the initial deposit, whether it's a project deposit or it's the first month or what have you. Don't even schedule it. Why? Well, I learned this the hard way. My first job as an agency PM, I inherited a project, and the project was to do a website, some print material, and a photo shoot for an Olympic athlete. Now, I was really excited. I was thinking ahead, like, wow, produced photo shoot for Olympic athlete. I was already thinking about the resume bullets. Problem is, my boss had sort of sold the deal, but hadn't really nailed down the details to the point that there was no contract, there was no defined scope, and there was no defined price. And I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. And he was like, no, we need to get going. It turned out he had already scheduled the photo shoot. So she was flying in for the photo shoot, and her agency was, her agent was coming in. And it's like, I'm thinking, okay, now I just need to do damage control. I was able to arrange for a $500 deposit just to cover things, and then we charge a bit more to turn over the full res edited photos, and then we'd figure out the details later. Not ideal, but I figure at least if we get some money up front, that'll help. What happened, my team, several people, several days at the stadium doing the photo shoot, this and that. A couple weeks later, we had the fully edited photos, and I followed up with the Olympic athlete's agent and said, hey, we have the photos, we need the next $500, and I'm glad to send them over to you, and then we'll figure out the details. Her agent said, well, unfortunately, we have lost the major sponsor. We're going to have to pull the plug on the whole project. We had done something like $5,000 of work for $500. Not good. Now, two positive outcomes for me. One, I realized never schedule kickoff until you have the money and you have the deposit. And second, that resume bullet was on my resume for a long time. Produced photo shoot for Olympic athlete. Oh boy. And I see, Don, thanks for sharing. You mentioned adding the policy after several clients didn't pay you for months after you'd started work. That is frustrating, but for sure, you are not the only person who has struggled with that. So I'm sorry, but I'm also glad that you're able to learn from it. If you are listening right now and you do not have a policy where scheduling kickoff is dependent on the payment of the deposit or the initial amount and the signed contract, please start doing that. And you know what? Now you might be thinking, well, wait, I can't do that because, they're in a hurry. They're like, we got to get started. And if we go to purchasing, it's going to take 60 days to get a check cut and things like that.
I think the standard rule is there is no exception. Just get the money before you do the work. And particularly with anything service-based, you can't take it back.
No.
You can't get your time back. You can't get your effort back. And as well in many service areas, it's subjective. If the Olympic athlete doesn't like the photo shoot at the end of it, like, I'm not paying for that, I don't like it. It's completely subjective matter of opinion as to whether it's a perfect set of photos or terrible. So, and if you're in that position with $4,500 outstanding, you lose.
And I found one solution to that. Say you do net 30 terms, switch it over to net 15 that people have to pay you sooner. So as soon as it's day 16, you can be calling to remind them that they're past due. Keep it moving. In my case, it's payment with a deposit or the initial month or what have you up front. And if there's any later stuff, it's due net 7. That is really aggressive, but those are the terms and people want to work with me. And so that's just the way it is. The more in demand you are, the easier it is to dictate aggressive terms to your clients. But also, if your policy is we need the money before we get started, if a client is in a hurry and they say they're in a hurry, they will prove it to you by paying you sooner. And, say you're working with a large corporation, it may be a case where, it takes a while for the purchase order to get set up, but maybe the person you're speaking with or their boss can put your initial charge on their corporate credit card rather than waiting for the PO process. People have surprisingly large, credit limits, all things considered. At one point, I had a client where they paid via check, and at the bottom it said 2 signatures required if. 2 signatures were required for payments over $50,000. Like, they could have paid us $49,999 on just 1 signature. It was crazy. It's crazy.
It's great. I've just seen
stuff. Oh, so go ahead.
So Brian wins the comment of the day in the chat. It says, net 30, what's that? Lol. Hashtag prepay only. Supported by Jack with hashtag team prepay. And I would endorse that every step of the way.
Big fan. Obviously, if you're in a situation where the amount is going to vary each month, in that case, obviously prepay isn't always an option, but you know what? Maybe there's a fixed amount that they prepay, and then they pay the variable amount, after that.
That's exactly what we do with some services we buy, and it works great.
Nice. Here's the one thing. If you do this one thing, it's going to totally change your agency. And it's something I call a pre-kickoff survey. So here's how that works. This is a survey you send around to all of the key client stakeholders before the kickoff meeting, before you get started on things. In the survey, you'll ask some questions. You'll customize these to your agency. Some questions might include, what is your definition of success? I like to ask in terms of different timelines. Let's say we have just completed the project or the engagement. What does success look like? Okay. Let's say it's a year later, or 3 years, or 5, or you can find the right term. What does success look like in that case? You want to know what they define success to be. And interestingly, you will find different stakeholders have different definitions of success. And sometimes they have unreasonable expectations. If you know what those are, now you have a chance to reconcile them. Sometimes their definition of success will conflict with each other. And now you can work with your contact to try to reconcile those. Another one is, what has their experience been like working with other agencies before? What went well, what didn't go well? Oftentimes I'll find people in working with me, they'll say, well, it was good general advice, but they wanted to work with someone who is an agency specialist. Or other times there were situations where, the advice was good, but they weren't good at helping them stay accountable or managing details. It was like the coach or the consultant didn't remember what they talked about before.
Carl, can I just take a breath for a second? I'll ask the audience a question. Guys, tell me. I'm assuming and I'm hoping, so I'm not going to ask, that most people have a version of what does a client think is success in their either in their sales process or their onboard process or both. So you know what you've sold and that the client thinks is buying. Who here asks what their past agency's experience been? Put it in the chat. Just tell me honestly, yes if you ask that question, no if you don't ask that question. Put starting if you're going to start and ask that question.
And I'm curious, if you ask the question, what are some of the craziest examples you've heard? I started doing that as a director of client services at an agency. And there was one time where the client talked about, the previous agency was terrible, and they had some examples. What I found from working with them, the consistent factor here was the client being terrible. And for sure, by the way, terrible clients usually are not terrible people. They're normal people in terrible situations. In that particular example, the client was under enormous pressure to launch things, and unfortunately, we were bearing the brunt of that. But pay attention.
And the answers, by the way, from the chat, a couple of no's, mostly yeses. And Larry actually goes furthest of anybody, says he does it during the pre-consultation phase before even pitching.
I do that too.
Use it in your pitch.
Yeah.
This is pain you can put a Band-Aid over as part of your solution. Find the pain.
Exactly. Either you're going to find that you can solve things in ways that others didn't, or it's going to raise some red flags about what the client would be like to work with. Either way, you win. Looking at other questions to consider, how do they prefer to communicate? Are they a phone person? Are they a written communication person?
Yeah, John says it eliminates all the objections up front. Brian says he did it with a cosmetic doctor recently, with 4 partners, and one of them vented for 20 minutes. And from Brian's perspective, that's the perfect lesson on how to not handle this guy.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Edgar, great to hear you're planning to start it. It's such a powerful question.
Nice. So you know what their communication preferences are. I learned last year that a client's middle manager had ordered her employees not to answer the phone when clients called. That is, they would go to voicemail, and then they weren't even to call them back. They were to email the client back in response to the voicemail. I could not believe this. It's like, there's a reason they called you. You are just going to make them unhappy when you email back. So yeah, don't do that. There were other issues too. Apparently, one employee in my follow-up conversations said that she felt guilty about taking bathroom breaks for the first month that she worked there.
Wow, so, that's one strong bladder.
Yeah. So, ultimately, watch out for what your middle managers are doing. They may not be representing you well. Okay. And then, finally, if you want more on this, you go to sakasandcompany.com/pre-kickoff-survey. You can,
I'll put that in the chat now.
Awesome. And if you go there, you can get some more questions. You can get some other advice. I think I linked to my pre-kickoff survey for projects. You can see what that looks like. So I'd love to answer your other questions, and then I have a challenge for you before we close. So think about whatever questions have come up along the way. Would love to answer them. Good opportunity to get all kinds of free advice.
Yeah, guys, now's your chance. Fire in the questions. I'm going to start and look through what we've got already and some of the comments that have made while people are typing. So, Yusuf says, he learned about this by asking pre-applicants about their past employment before hiring them. It's a very similar thing, isn't it? Ask people, past behavior and past experiences are pretty good indicators to future. So, Larry says it's like dating. Listen to how they talk about prior agencies and partners. Completely. Yeah, completely. Dating makes perfect sense. I love John's comment that doing it up front, it eliminates all the sales objections because you've dealt them, you've handled them. Okay. I'm just flicking back. Yeah, Brian, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen it, Brian raised the Thanks app, spelled THNKS, in the App Store for easy gift giving.
Nice.
So give that a look.
Nice.
All right, people are typing. Really interesting one here from Richard. This is a little off topic, but I'll let it through because it's interesting. It's piqued my attention. Richard says, what's the one big idea for scaling an agency you can provide? I've got an answer if you want to think about it.
Well, no, I have a suggestion. So, there are a lot of things, but ultimately, as Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. If you know where you want to go, you can work backwards from there. And I have a free tool on my website called an advance retrospective. It's a visioning tool where you write about the future before it happens. And if you're looking at 2 different options, say whether to sell your agency or do something different, you can write 2 different advanced retrospectives, one where you sell, one where you don't. See which one of those resonate more. The key thing is you have to make decisions that fit how you want to grow, where you want to grow. And I talked about those values, goals, and resources. So yes, do the visioning exercise, the advanced retrospective. But if we were to look at one thing, it's to understand where you fall on what I call your growth style continuum. And the options there are you've got lifestyle and you've got equity or high growth. Most people are somewhere in the middle. They lean one or the other. Lifestyle is you want to grow a profitable business, grow moderately, get above average salary, things like that. Have fund a nice lifestyle outside of the agency, but you're not planning to sell. That's lifestyle. On the equity side, the plan is to build the valuation of the agency so that you can have an exit, so you can sell the business at some point in the future. Might be a couple of years, might be 5 years, 10 years, at different timelines, but the goal is to sell. So we've got lifestyle and equity. The default for agencies is lifestyle, is a services business, that typically fits the lifestyle business model. If you plan to sell, there's certain decisions you have to make along the way in terms of your lead gen, in terms of staffing, and agency structure, and so on. I have more on this on my website. If you do go to sakasandcompany.com, the article there is about equity versus lifestyle business. If you can figure that out and then make all of the right decisions based on that, you are going to have a much easier time scaling things.
I would completely agree with every word of that. Starting with the end in mind is the only way to start sensibly. Personally, I didn't do that at all when I started this business, but when I started this business out of panic mode, I had no choice. I had to find an income very, very quickly. But we've evolved since then, and as a business now, we actually do have the end in mind. And it makes everything else so much easier once you know what that might be. I'm just going to dive back and I'm going to add to that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go the exact opposite in terms of answer to that which Karl just gave. So Karl gave you a really, really smart strategic answer. I'm going to flip it and give you a really, really tactical answer. When you get a client, providing it's a good client and not 50 Shades of Crazy, look after them well, and upsell the bejesus out of them, because if you're doing a great job, you'll have no problem upselling more services, and get referrals from them. One thing that you might not appreciate, the value difference between a business that can retain its clients and one that can't retain its clients. Your revenue, your profits, everything else proportionally grow if you build your business off selling to customer, winning a customer, selling them more, upselling them, using them as a referral. And it doesn't have to be a referral in terms of get them to introduce you. It can be get the case studies that you can then proactively market. It doesn't have to be a referral as such. Tell that story, tell that success, and leverage the heck out of it, and repeat and repeat and repeat. And we see it in our business every day, that we know that the most likely time a client will cancel is in the first 90 days. By far, that's when they will cancel. If we know once they're at 90 days, there is an 80% chance of them being there in 6 months. We know if they hit 6 months, there is a 95% chance they'll be there in 12 months. And believe it or not, if they hit 12 months, it's 98% chance they'll be there in 2 years. Think about the difference in the revenue and the profits that creates in your business, because they don't stick around and stay constant. If they're happy and they're staying, they're growing and spending more. So to my mind, it's tactical, but it's super important that you recognize the impact that makes. That first 100 days and 90, which includes 10 days before something happens, onboarding, exactly what we're talking about, and the 90 days that follow determine the growth of your business.
Definitely. There's a question from Larry about what kind of client retention gifting have you found effective? For instance, thank you note, what about month 2, month 3, quarterly, and so on? I actually do not have a specific pattern for that, but that's also because it's really more of a continuous approach. So I do year-end gifts and things like that. But for instance, I follow HARO, the Help a Reporter Out list about PR opportunities. So if I see something that fits a client, I forward it over. And you know what? You can do that for your clients too. Follow HARO. The free option is good. They have some paid options that have different upgrades, but it's at helpareporter.com. If you send an opportunity to someone, even if they don't actually pitch it, much less get the coverage, it's showing that you're thinking about them. That's part of warmth. So, I read the HARO email almost as soon as it comes in 3 times a day, Monday through Friday, looking for things that are a fit for my business, but also things that will help my clients. It takes just a tiny bit of extra time, and it goes from there. Another reason, by the way, to be specialized. So if they're like, we're looking for someone who specializes in real estate marketing, blah, 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 it's like, well, I can think of the person who fits that, rather than, well, they're a full service agency. They'll do anything for anyone.
I'm going to add to that with a point that I hope, Larry, you take in the spirit in which it's intended. The gift that is the most effective by far is the one that gets sent. It's the one you actually do. It doesn't matter whether it's a rocking horse, whether it's a cap, a thank you note, or whatever. If you've done it, you've won.
Don't discount the value of sending physical things. I actually just did a report in my accounting software last week. Over the past 12 months, I've spent nearly $1,000 US on postage and shipping.
You're shipping cars.
What's that?
Are you shipping cars or something?
No. But that's everything from stamps to sending books and stuff like that. A little more expensive. That has intentionally gone up every year. A couple of years ago it was 500, then it was 750. And looking at about 1,000. That's a sign that I'm sending stuff. It's good. So there's a question from Steph. What medium do you recommend for surveys and data collection? For instance, Gravity Forms, fillable PDFs, etc. My recommendation would be use a tool that integrates with what you already have. So if you already have a surveying account subscription, use the one you got. If you don't have one yet, I use SurveyMonkey. We've got Gravity Forms, of course. Not a huge fan of fillable PDFs, but that may work for your clients. I recently hired a financial planner, CFP, and his intake process included fillable PDFs, and that worked out just fine. It depends on your client base. Of course, a free option is using Google Forms. I found the user experience for Google Forms for people filling it out is not great. I would rather you invest something toward a friendlier approach, whether that's Gravity Forms, Typeform.
Yeah.
SurveyMonkey.
A couple of comments on that. Wufoo is really configurable and really stylish. All the forms on our website currently are Wufoo forms, but they've been heavily styled, so they look really elegant now. And it's got some smart logic in them. You can also, as you mentioned, straight out of the box, Typeform is incredibly elegant.
Yeah.
The experience of filling in a type form feels, I wouldn't say effortless, it's less effort than other forms. And that makes a difference if you can, again, warmth and experience makes it feel nicer.
Make sure that whatever you're doing to show client appreciation, it's about what they want, not about what you want. There's value to sending things that are about you sometimes. I mean, like, say, my book, it's like, well, okay, yeah, my photo's on the back, but it's ultimately about advice to help people lead their agency team that's made to lead, and also to help the in-demand marketing agency find clients through public speaking. But my year-end promo this past year, or year-end thank you package, included a few things. One of the items was a 3x3-inch canvas with a logo painting, but it was not my logo. It was each client's logo. I did a specially commissioned painting for each person of their logo, because to them, that is the most important logo for them, not my logo. Yet, of course, when they display that in their office, they're thinking about me.
And they will display it in their office, and they will talk about you.
Yeah.
Absolutely the best way to do it. And I'm so glad, by the way, you answered Steph's question, because I saw the truncated name on my Zoom chat and assumed it was my friend Stephen Whittle, or Stephen Whittier. And I would have said it all wrong, so I'm glad you spotted that one ahead of me. What else have we got? Steph's also asked, what's your favourite way to present upsell offers to clients? Email, in person, phone. Brian's put a really elegant answer on it, which is it depends how you close them. Depends how your relationship's configured, I think. You know how you manage that relationship with that individual and that business. Present the offer in the way that fits in with your current, if whatever communication style is working with them, use that.
If you've got a client, in general, you don't want to just email a proposal.
I was about to caveat that, actually. Don't email it.
To a cold prospect, the two options would be either schedule a meeting where you present it, or my preference, schedule a meeting to review it and then send it a day or two in advance. So that way it's not like they have to follow my schedule of hearing how I present it, but go with the one that works for you. I have never had anyone pre-cancel their Q&A conversation after agreeing to it. They need to agree to some sort of a meeting with you, because why should you invest the time to create the proposal without them agreeing to invest 45 minutes to discuss it? But if you've got a current client who says yes to everything you propose, emailing them is probably fine. But it's going to depend on the situation, as Rob, as you said, customize.
Absolutely. Larry's creating a system for gift giving. Love it. Brian asks a really good question, actually. So different, Brian. Do you recommend sticking with one service only and growing your agency, for example, PPC, or have multiple services or different separate income streams as well?
It depends on your long-term goals. If you lean toward equity, you probably want to diversify into multiple services. If you lean more toward lifestyle, you're probably fine with the one. But I would say that if you provide one service, you absolutely need to have a referral network of people you can point for additional help. For instance, if you want to focus exclusively on PPC and stay there, your clients are probably going to need SEO help at some point. They may need branding help. They may need video help. They may need social media help, and so on. Have someone you can point them to, whether that's with a referral fee or not. It really comes down to, do you want to keep the work in-house and potentially make a higher margin on it? Or do you want to refer it out and just get the referral fee, if you charge a referral fee, and not have to do the work further beyond that? So it depends on your growth goals. I am a fan of diversifying your services to some extent, but you have to decide what's right for you.
Nice one. Karl, do you want to move on? I'm just conscious of time. I know there was a couple of last little things you wanted to get through. So
yeah. Ultimately, if you'd like additional tips, free tips, you can go to sakasandcompany.com/newsletter. That's free tips every Wednesday. The latest one was around dealing with what I call reluctant employees. What do you do if you have a reluctant employee, someone who can do the job but is choosing not to? Some tips there. Coming up soon, I have one on creating a step-by-step sales process for your agency. It's an almost 3,000-word article about all the steps to include and how to make it work. So go to sakasandcompany.com/newsletter and you can get that. You'll also get my ebook on handling difficult clients. The ebook is called Don't Just Make the Logo Bigger, Taking Clients from Painful to Profitable. And you get that free of charge as soon as you sign up. So my challenge for you is this. There are a lot of things you could do. I would say this: if you don't currently have a pre-kickoff survey, make one. You can see my article on it. You can get some ideas on questions, but start doing that. And importantly, make sure you ask all of the key stakeholders. If a stakeholder declines to do it because they're too busy, or if your contact is like, well, I don't want to ask them because they're busy, that person is, practically guaranteed to show up later and cause problems. The technical term for that is swoop and poop. They fly in, drop some not great feedback, and then fly away, leaving you to clean up the mess. Use that pre-kickoff form, not just the answers you get, but the way that people handle it. Are they engaged with the process? Good. If they seem to be avoiding it, they're probably going to be problematic later. So if you don't do a pre-kickoff survey, do that. That's my challenge. If you do have the pre-kickoff survey already, you can go ahead and upgrade it. In that case, though, my challenge for you would be look for ways to apply warmth and competence in your agency. I think you will be pleasantly surprised with how it goes.
Love it. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Karl. Now, I've just seen a question in the chat to a basic onboarding checklist. That's from Jimmy. Jimmy, what I'm going to do is I've just put a link in here in the chat to our onboarding form. But what I've given you is not the live version. The live version on our website for a client, but this actually gives you a PDF version of it, so you can, just scroll down the page and you'll get to see all the questions that we ask. Now, ours is obviously applicable to an agency selling PPC services, but you'll get the idea of the sort of questions we ask, why they ask them. It looks a lot more onerous on the page that I've just shared than it does actually in reality, because in reality it's broken down into several little pages and it's nice presented. But here, it gives you the kind of questions that we ask and the logic that we apply in the form. So enjoy that. You find that useful. So, last couple of moments. I hope everybody's getting massive value out of this session today. Karl has been incredibly generous with his knowledge and what he's shared and his experience. And Karl and I, although we have different experiences, come from a similar place in that we at Invisible work with lots and lots of agencies. So we see how agencies behave. Karl works with lots and lots of agencies of a slightly different but similar type. So we've both seen the problems from different perspectives, and can see commonalities in this. I mean, I strongly believe if you get the onboarding, from pre-sale through onboarding right, it will be the single biggest lever you can pull in your agency, because everything else works off the back of that. And it's all about building that trust, building that relationship, and it sets the tone for the relationship. And think about that. How many relationships did you have that started really badly that you stuck with a year later? Most relationships like that end because they start with mistrust, they start with nervousness, it continues that way, and at the first reason to dive off, that partner, it might be, someone you're dating, whatever it is, if it starts badly, it's going to end usually quickly and usually badly. This is your chance to change that tone of that initial point of contact and make it a really valuable trust-building experience. And remember this part of it that I think it's been mentioned briefly, but I just want to reinforce. Mm-hmm. You're the expert. They're hiring you because they trust you. You've done a good job during pre-sales. Your first chance to demonstrate, let's call it paid competence, because now they're paying you for this, is that onboarding process. You've sold being an expert, live being an expert, lead them through the process. Back to Karl's toddler analogy. Don't let the toddler decide when it wants to eat and drink and what it wants to wear for the day. You make those kind of calls, you make the decisions, and you choose how that client is going to experience it to show off the best of you and get the best from them. And I think you'll find that's massively, massively valuable. So, Karl, any final comments before we wrap up here?
Absolutely. And I'll post this in the chat, but share it verbally as well. There are a lot of things that happen along the way that we can't always expect, but there are all kinds of things that we can expect. So here's my, my pithy quote. If you take time to plan for the expected, you'll have time to improvise the unexpected. Again, that's if you take time to plan for the expected, you'll have time to improvise the unexpected.
Absolutely. It resonates fully with me at the minute. Actually, I'm about a third of the way through listening to a book called Extreme Ownership. Anybody on the call read Extreme Ownership? It's a book written by two former Navy SEAL commanders of the Navy SEAL approach, which essentially is the person in charge owns and takes responsibility for everything. Good, bad, wins, losses, things that may have been delegated down 10 levels in command. Doesn't matter, it's on you. And take that approach into your onboarding, take the responsibility, take the ownership, plan for the expected. And you're right, you can figure the rest out. So,
yes.
Right, thank you so much. Please, in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind now, Karl has given up his valuable time today to be with us all. I hope you've got value out of that. If you have, put a massive thanks in the chat for Karl.
Awesome.
And you can see the
Thank you,
chat already,
everyone.
but Youssef, Larry, Ryan, Bill, Roger, everybody who's saying thank you, Phil, Steph, we really, really appreciate Mike, Darren, John, awesome guys. Thank you so much. Karl, thank you all. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Don't forget, I said it at the start, and shameless promo, I'm going to say it at the end. If you're getting out there, go find a client. We can give your client $150 off their first month ad spend, provided they spend $150. You get $150 off your second month's management fee, and you also get it off month 3 as well, to all help with your onboarding, your retention, and your client experience. So go out and get some clients and have a great rest of the week. Mike, it's GBP equivalent, so it's about 110, whatever it is, on current exchange rates. So everybody have a wonderful rest of the day and the rest of the week. If you're in the US, have a holiday weekend and enjoy that. If you're not in the US, and in my case in particular, enjoy a quiet day, not having to talk to people in the US. Get lots of work done.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it. Cheers. Bye.